All right, you guys, we are going to do some work now on page 7 in the note packet, and I do want you to pause this and or look at the picture that I will post so that you can get the vocabulary words down. I just already had them written just so it saves time, but you want to make sure you pause this and write down all of the vocabulary words because now I'm just going to explain them. But we're going to talk about extrema. And an extrema is a set of extreme high and low points. So really the maximums and the minimums of a graph. So if we are talking about something that is a relative minimum, or I'm sorry, a relative maximum, that means it's the highest point in a section of a graph. The key word here is that it's a section of the graph. So we will do a couple of examples, but just drawing a random example right now, if I drew a graph and it looked like this, say it looks like that, okay? This graph would have relative maximums by section. So there's a maximum. This section of this graph has a maximum right here, right? It has a highest spot right here. But also there's another spot where we see a maximum. And maximum happens anytime your graph goes up and then down. So it looks like the top of a hill. So the highest point on a section of the graph. So for an example, this example that I just came up with off the top of my head has 2 relative maximums. So I wrote myself a note off to the side here that there could be many of these, okay? And then likewise, the relative minimum is the lowest point in a section of a graph. So anytime there's a low point. So a low point would happen right here and right here. So there are 2 low points. There are 2 relative minimums. It's just the lowest point of a certain spot. So again, there could be many relative maximum and minimums. Okay? Now, on the other side, we have absolute maximums and absolute minimums. The absolute maximum is the highest point on the entire graph. So there is only one of these. There's only one point that's the absolute highest. And so if I were to erase some of the stuff I have here, I'm going to redraw my picture. Oops. Say this was my picture, okay? The absolute highest spot would be, well, those look almost identical, so that's not going to help. But let's say we have something like this. Okay, say we had something like that. The absolute highest point on this graph would be right here. So there is a few spots where we have a maximum, right? These are 2 relative maximums, but the absolute highest point would be the one I just highlighted in orange. There's only one, and there's only one absolute minimum. So although both of these spots right here are relative minimums, they're the minimums of that section, there's only one of them that's absolutely the lowest spot. Okay, so there's only one of those. All right, and then we have something called an x-intercept and a y-intercept. You have seen these before. The x-intercept is a point where the graph crosses the x-axis. So I have a graph right here, and say we just have something like this. Your x-axis, remember, goes left to right. So there's my x-axis, and here is my y-axis. My y-axis goes up and down. So your x-intercept is the point where the graph, my graph in blue, crosses my x-axis, which is in black. So that's going to happen about right here and right here. And when I give you a graph, you'll be able to see what point that happens at. So we would actually write the point. And then likewise, we have the y-intercept is where your graph, my blue graph, is going to cross my y-axis, which is my axis that goes up and down. So that's going to happen about right here. All right, and I would have numbers. In a real example, I would have numbers so I can tell you exactly what point that happens at. All right, so again, make sure that you have all of this written down. And if you have any questions on this, just let me know. But we are going to jump into 2 examples. We're going to do one on this page and one on page 8. So there's about 2 more videos coming your way.